Friends, let's go ahead and get started with a case study. If you recall, of course, we've been doing our mini module on business and the environment, and I want to start today by looking at Patagonia, which is a company that some of us have shopped at before. Has anyone shopped at Patagonia before? A couple or three of us. Okay, they've got kind of a cult following, and we'll see why in a minute. Their gear is often too expensive for college students. It's pretty expensive stuff. Let's look at their mission statement, though. Build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. And then they go on to talk about how the company loves wild and beautiful places, etc. This is pretty clearly a stakeholder-based mission statement and not a shareholder-based mission statement, like the Friedman-esque view would be. Quite clearly, it's a company that's set up not just for profits for the owners, but for the sake of something else than just profits. Okay, the founder started in the climbing industry, making pistons, making various different climbing hooks and ropes. He expanded to selling clothes and gear, introducing the Patagonia brand in the 1970s. The items Patagonia produces and sells range from clothing for extreme winter sports to summer wear for summer sports, including gear for surfing and diving activities, as well as fishing and climbing gear. These are sample stores. The stores tend to be pretty neat and well ordered. They also are relatively high-end in the kinds of customers they cater to. So like I said, usually these products are too expensive for college students. They give back a substantial amount of money to environmental causes. For instance, 100% of global retail, both in-store and online Black Friday sales, this last year directly went to grassroots nonprofits. They also do things that are more controversial, like donating money to remove dams. One of the issues in business and the environment the business and the environment interface is, of course, how much development can we do without doing harm? Because the trade-off is almost always that more industrial development, more business, more technological development leads to greater environmental harm. It's pretty controversial to go as far as actually removing dams, although there are a lot of people who advocate it and do so on grounds of restoring ecosystems and reviving wildlife. I have, in general, a good deal of respect for this company over and against other kinds of companies. The reason why is because most companies just virtue signal when it comes to business and the environment issues. They don't actually make an effort behind the scenes to do anything. For instance, I think that Tesla is largely virtue signaling. I don't actually think that they are doing much to, for the sake of what they claim to be doing, which is helping the environment. But I think Patagonia is doing legitimate work. One reason why is because of things like this Common Threads initiative. The purpose of this is to reduce unnecessary consumption. They take recycled clothing, and then they make new clothing using that recycled clothing. Okay, the idea of actually recycling the clothing instead of trying to incentivize customers to purchase new clothing all the time is a very environmentally friendly idea, and it's one of the things that I think makes this company pretty unique. There have been some issues, though, at Patagonia. For instance, they committed to sustainable and responsible sourcing of wool starting in 2008. Let's take the case of Avis 21, which is a farm network that supplies Patagonia with wool for merino-based layers and insulation used in their clothing. Okay, in August 2005, the animal rights activist group PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, released a graphic video showing lambs and sheep experiencing extreme cruelty at the hands of Avis 21 farmers. PETA is a controversial organization. Their graphic videos are often very graphic indeed, but sometimes they do highlight real problems. Patagonia responded to the video with a statement claiming that they were unaware of animal welfare issues within the Avis 21 farm network. They apologized for harm done in their name and committed to an investigation. In the end, Patagonia ceased to purchase more wool until they found a partner that would behave more responsibly. Eventually, in July of 2016, they partnered with two like-minded farms in the United States, Stock Ranch in Oregon and Red Pine Land and Livestock Company in Utah, as their wool suppliers. Let's do a quick SWOT analysis of this company. Their strengths are their environmentally friendly products. They have a real cult following because of this niche product offering that they provide. Okay, their products are very high quality. Those of you who have purchased Patagonia products are familiar with this in comparison to big box retailers that also sell climbing gear, Target, Walmart. This is obviously a much higher end store. Weaknesses, well, it takes a lot of money to purchase those products, and they have competition from others who sell for less. Okay, their choices in advertising have also been risky and complex. So for instance, one reason why I think that this company is legit is because of this advertising campaign. Don't buy this jacket. Okay? But it's also a complex and risky choice in advertising. Not something that's very easy to get across as a message to consumers. The most environmentally friendly thing that you can do as a consumer is to use your products longer. Use your car longer. Wear your clothing longer, wear your shoes longer. That's the most environmentally friendly thing that you can do. And so Patagonia actually ran a campaign urging people to repair their old things. You know, with Patagonia would make a profit from the repairs, but not to buy new products. And that's a pretty complex message to get across to consumers. It's something that wasn't necessarily especially successful for them as an advertising message. But maybe they saw themselves as targeting their own niche audience, since this is a pretty niche company. Their opportunities include opportunities for expansion into a number of different countries. Leisure time is generally increasing across the world because of increasing prosperity, and with leisure comes more outdoor activities. Their threats include, as I mentioned, competition from brands offering similar products such as North Face, Columbia, REI. Less expensive outdoor clothing is sold at Walmart and thrift stores. Okay, their main consumer group is middle class, outdoorsy, active, and usually young adult customers. One final little comment on this company. They recently did a Worn Wear college tour where they actually went around to a bunch of different colleges and universities, including here in Houston, and repaired student clothing, encouraging students to repair their clothing rather than just to throw it out and purchase new clothing. They did not come to HBU. They came to a bunch of other schools. I don't know, maybe that's because this school is conservative. Maybe it's because this school is smaller. I'm not sure. Anyway. Okay, questions or comments about this company or this case study? Cool. Okay. Let's go ahead and open up our Beyond Integrity texts. Joaquin, can you hit the lights for me, please? We're going to look at the Hoffman and Durr articles. Let's start with the Hoffman article on page 394. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, and I want to direct your attention to 395, bottom of the first page. Hoffman writes, the debate must clarify such, this is a setting ground for his discussion in this article. The debate must clarify such fundamental questions as 1, what obligation does business have to help with our environmental crisis? 2, what is the proper relationship between business and government, especially when faced with a social problem of the magnitude of the environmental crisis? And 3, what rationale should be used for making and justifying decisions to protect the environment? Okay, so what is business's obligations? What is the relationship between business and government that should hold here? And what is the proper justification for the decision making here. The business environment interface did not become such a hot button topic and such an important topic in business ethics until really about the last 60 years or so. For much of the history of capitalism, the amount of environmental damage that business could do was not that great, certainly not in comparison to what we can do now. So for all the belching of coal smoke that was going on during the early industrial revolution in the 19th century, it still paled in comparison to the capacities that humans have at this time for doing damage to the environment. Okay, but now that this has arisen as a big issue, Hoffman says we need to look at these three different fundamental questions. And to frame the issue, he references a quote from a well-known thinker, Norman Bowie. Let me read that quote on page 395, halfway down the second column. Bowie says, "Business does not have an obligation to protect the environment over and above what is required by law. However, it does have a moral obligation to avoid intervening in the political arena in order to defeat or weaken environmental legislation." That's a very Friedman-esque type quote, without a doubt. If you remember back at the start of the semester when we were looking at the purpose of business, one of the models was the shareholder model proposed by Milton Friedman. It's one of the two main models of the purpose of business that's available in business ethics today. And on Friedman's view, you can devote yourself as a business person to the making of money and make as much money as possible as long as you play within the rules of the game. And the rule maker is the government, the regulators. Okay, whatever the regulators stipulate, as long as you play within the rules of the game, you are justified in pursuing financial gain. Okay, and this is Bowie's perspective. Bowie's perspective is that, look, we have regulators. These regulators set the parameters of the law for business, and you can operate within these parameters legitimately. If the parameters are too loose, and if too many businesses are doing things that do harm to the environment, then let's just change the parameters. Let's change the legal regulations to tighten them up and make it harder for businesses to do that. But on the Friedman-esque view, it's not the responsibility of business persons to go above and beyond what the law stipulates, in their moral sensibilities or in the decision making that they pursue as they seek to preserve and protect environmental things. Rather, it is the responsibility of business persons to comply with whatever threshold standards are provided by the legislative environment. Okay, now that's a very influential and famous view. And it's a view that actually Hoffman is going to disagree with. But I thought that it might actually maybe facilitate our ability to understand and conceive of what is going on in this article and what's at stake here if we did a little exercise real quickly. Okay, so think of the issues at stake here in terms of a continuum. Those who say business bears substantial responsibility for environmental protection are on one side. And these people generally think that business persons ought to go above and beyond the legal minimum in doing right by environmental protection. So the law might provide us with outer boundaries on this view, but that doesn't mean that business persons ought to just confine themselves to those boundaries. Rather, business persons ought to take the lead and move far beyond just what the outer boundaries stipulates, doing much more than just the outer boundaries' minimal requirements. On the other side is the view that business bears little to no responsibility I'll take the extreme version and say no responsibility. And this view says business bears no responsibility, and by that is meant above and beyond what the law stipulates. Okay, so some people say business persons ought to go well beyond the law in preserving and protecting the environment. Others say that business persons ought to operate within the bounds of the law. And to help us conceive of this, I thought it might be useful to do a quick exercise here. These issues go to the heart of capitalism. They really drill down to the very basics of the capitalist structure. Okay, and some would say that capitalist markets are amoral in their nature. Okay, someone told me what amoral means. What does it mean for something to be amoral? So we know what immoral is. It's like not moral. What is amoral?
Acting morally.
They're like neutral, right?
It's actually what Keisha was saying. So it's neutral. Some would say that capitalist markets are amoral structures. That is, they don't make moral judgments, and it would be wrong on this view of things to bring moral judgments into capitalist markets and to claim that they make moral pronouncements. Rather, capitalist markets are just locations where buyers and sellers get together with each other in the most efficient possible manner. That special price point where the buyer is willing to pay and the seller is willing to let go of the good. Okay, others would say that actually capitalist markets are laced with all sorts of moral expectations and assumptions, and that it would be entirely too hasty to conceive of them as amoral structures. All right, so let's do the quick exercise then. 120K a year as a salary is a pretty good opening salary after college, isn't it? If you could get out of college and take a job for 120K a year, most of us are going to be feeling pretty good about that. Real good, in fact. Okay, bachelor's degrees don't get as much as they used to be able to get for people, especially because of the rise of graduate education, and it usually requires some sort of advanced degree to get this kind of a salary. But suppose that you could get 120K a year for working in a vice industry. Okay, an industry that is, seen by some, maybe even many in society, as leading customers into vice. Okay, let me start with one that we probably all would agree on, because I think we would probably be, most of us at least, would be willing to work in this industry for 120K a year. For 120K a year, would you sell beer? Raise your hand. Let's actually make this real. Raise your hand. Oh, I thought more of us would agree on this. Okay. Some of us looked around before we made our vote. Okay. 3, 4. All right. Interesting. Very interesting. What about weapons? And by this I mean guns. Okay. Maybe even national defense weapons. 4, 5 of us. Okay. Some of us over here are like, no chance. Okay. Interesting. All right. What about another classic vice industry? Gambling. Would you run a casino or work at a casino for 120K a year? Only one, and it wasn't someone who voted on the first two. Fascinating, Joaquin. You're like the brave soul who, I figured more people would be willing to work in gambling. Interesting. This is good to know, I suppose. What about cigarettes? Would you sell cigarettes for 120K a year? Raise your hands. None of us would sell cigarettes for 120K a year. Oh my goodness. This is fascinating. Oh, but let's do the health product counterpart to cigarettes, right? Cannabis. Would you do marijuana sales for 120K a year? Only one of us. Fascinating. This is really interesting. I appreciate your honesty, Keisha. Thank you for stepping out and saying that. Okay. What are some other vice industries? Let's make this really real. Who would run a strip club? Who would run a strip club for $120K a year? I'm going to change the salary for $520K a year right after college. Do I have any takers?
Oh man, that's a lot of money. I'd take that money, but morally, like if I get asked what do I do for my job, I don't want to say
1 million.
strip club.
1 million. Any
1
takers?
million?
1 million. Think of all the good you could do. You could give to all sorts of charitable causes, worthy causes with that 1 million salary. The good would outweigh the bad that is accomplished to earn the money, wouldn't it? So I was reading an article not too long ago. It was an interview with the famous Mexican drug lord El Chapo, who's now in a U.S. federal prison, right? This guy's a really legendary figure, rose from incredible poverty to become the biggest drug lord in Mexican history. And the interviewer asked him, you clearly have been a very successful businessman in a vice industry, and your product leads to all sorts of addictions, especially among young people, and you're the purveyor, the provider of this product. How do you feel about that? How do you justify that to yourself? And El Chapo said something I thought was fascinating. He said, if I don't sell the product to them, someone else will, because the demand is there whether I'm selling the product or not. So it might as well be me, because I can do all sorts of good things with the money. I thought that was fascinating reasoning. And I think pretty clearly whether you participate in, gambling as a seller of casino products or tobacco or strip clubs, the demand will still be there, whether or not you're making money off of it. But El Chapo is kind of an extreme consequentialist to say those things. Okay, he's justifying his behavior by saying, look, it's actually better consequentially that I be the one to sell this product than that someone else sell this product, because I can do good things with it, and the consequences justify my decision to sell this product. Okay, but usually extreme consequentialism leads to very bad places ethically. Okay, extreme consequentialism, fundamentalist consequentialism, leads to justifications for extremely bad behaviors and practices that almost nobody in human history would justify. I guess my take on it is this. By the way, the only one that I think I'd probably be willing to do is this one, because weapons can also be used for good things like defense and stuff like that. Would I sell anything else? I might sell alcohol. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. What about Ashley Madison? Anybody work for them for $520K a year?
I'm not sure what they do.
What's that?
What do they do?
It's a website. It's like a social media website for people who want to have an affair.
Oh, that's nice.
So if you want to have an affair, you just sign up, get an account, and you can find somebody else who wants to have an affair. Actually, they recently had a data hack, and all of their users' data got spilled out onto the web. So all the people with secret accounts got found out. But get this. This is how messed up America is. Their customer base surged after their data hack because of the publicity that they got from the news accounts of this. Okay, the reason, anyway, so I would say a much more constructive approach to this rather than just extreme consequentialism like El Chapo uses to justify his decision-making would be some sort of a more mainstream deontological consequentialist hybrid, and certainly on a deontological basis, participating in vice industries, even if you can do good with the money that you make from the vice industries, still wouldn't be a justifiable sort of a thing, because it's predatory on people's desires and needs, and you're trying to intentionally addict them in a way that involves soft coercion. Okay, I share this exercise so as to illustrate that some people would say that markets are neutral. They are amoral with regard to what they do. Okay, markets just connect up buyers and sellers. They don't actually they don't have laced within them in some implicit way certain moral assumptions or expectations. Okay, others would say that no, actually by facilitating or enabling addiction-like relationships, gambling is an addictive product, although probably less addictive than something like tobacco. By facilitating addictive-like relationships between buyers and sellers, markets actually don't play a morally neutral role. Okay, the people who see markets as playing a morally neutral role tend to also be the people who think that it is the job of business persons to play within the rules that the regulators stipulate, but not necessarily to go above and beyond the regulator stipulations. If we want to tighten those stipulations from the regulators, let's do that, these people would say. If we don't tighten them, then it's not the responsibility of business persons to insert moral sensibilities into their participation in the market. Whereas, of course, the people on the other side say business persons bearing substantial responsibility for things like the environment can and should insert moral sensibilities into the way they run their business and make moral decisions, morally valent decisions about whether or not the products that they are selling to customers are predatory or addictive or are actually benefiting customers. Okay, Bowie himself, I'm sorry, not Bowie, so Bowie is on this side, Hoffman himself is on this side. Okay, and let's look at Hoffman's response to Bowie's discussion. So this is on page 396. I'm going to pick and choose a few passages here, but you're welcome to follow along in the second column towards the bottom. Hoffman writes, if the business ethics movement has led us anywhere in the past 15 years, it is to the position that business has an ethical responsibility to become a more active partner in dealing with social concerns. Okay, so he is of the view that business persons, it's not obligatory, but good business practice requires thinking in a morally valent way about the nature of the product that you're using and the damages that that you're selling and the damages that that product could potentially be doing to customers or to the cultural surroundings. He goes on in the next paragraph to say corporations have special knowledge, expertise, and resources which are invaluable in dealing with the environmental crisis. Society needs the ethical vision and cooperation of all its players to solve its most urgent problems, especially ones that involve the very survival of the planet itself. Okay, and again, this doesn't reach the level of obligation in his mind, but it is at the level of expectation or the level of good business practice. If you want to be a good business person, Hoffman is saying, you should take the lead when it comes to environmental preservation rather than bring up the rear. Bringing up the rear usually would maximize your profits, but Hoffman wants to assert that you can still be profitable and do right by the environment, just be a little bit less profitable than you would otherwise be. Okay, but he is skeptical about the claim that you can maximize your profits while also maximizing preservation of the environment. Okay, and he wants to disabuse us of any overly optimistic ideas about it being possible to run our businesses in ways that optimize our own financial welfare and also do the best we could do for the environment. Because he thinks that these are actually, at a fundamental level, conflicting kinds of ideals. Okay? You can't, at a fundamental level, as Hoffman explains in the article, really pursue maximal preservation of environmental things while also pursuing maximal personal profits. These come into conflict at some point. Okay, and so he speaks then positively of efforts by businesses to do things that are not necessarily in their self-interest, but that are good for environmental causes. On page 397 in the first column, he writes, there are examples of corporations demonstrating such leadership, even when this has been a risk to their self-interest. In the area of environmental moral leadership, one might cite DuPont's discontinuing its Freon products, a $750 million a year business, because of their possible negative effects on the ozone layer, and Procter & Gamble's manufacture of concentrated fabric softener and detergents which require less packaging. So these are obviously multi-billion-dollar businesses that were in a financial position that was sufficiently successful to enable them to take a hit to their margins and to their profits for the sake of doing things that are environmentally responsible. Okay, let me ask if there are questions or comments at this point. I've been talking for a little while. Questions or comments about any of these ideas so far? Did we learn something about ourselves from this exercise? You know, there are also, so these are more extreme versions of it, but there are also milder versions of addictive products as well. Right? Facebook is an addictive product, isn't it? Everyone's addicted to the likes. You know, if you put up a post, you immediately want to go back and check and make sure that your self-worth is reaffirmed by virtue of getting a large number of likes on the post that you just put up. Okay, other industries are also mildly addictive. For sure, fast food, soft drinks, these are successful as industries because of the mild addictiveness of the product. Coffee, yeah, I think that's also a part of the same idea. But obviously, the industries I've put up here on the board take that addictiveness to a much greater level. It's like far greater than a mildly addictive product like coffee is. Okay. On page 398, Hoffman expands on some of these ideas. And I'm going through the article, by the way, because I know we haven't all read it yet, and I just want to, highlight these notions together for us. In the second column, he says, is the rationale that good ethics is good business a proper one for business ethics? I think not. Okay, one thing that the study of ethics has taught us over the past 2,500 years is that being ethical may on occasion require that we place the interests of others ahead of, or at least on par with our own interests. Okay, so he wants to be very sober-minded about the ability of business to make profits while also at the same time doing what is best for the cultural and environmental surroundings. And he thinks that there's a trade-off there. One thing that I tried to emphasize earlier in the course is that I think the sweet spot when it comes to a morally upright participation in capitalist markets is to find an industry and a business where you are doing what is best for you and simultaneously what is best for your customer, a mutually beneficial kind of an exchange. I think that's the sweet spot. And I think it's a way for Christians to participate in capitalist markets and to sell products in ways that are morally justifiable and responsible. Okay, and finally, last comment that I want to make in this part of the section before we turn to a very different topic in the second half of the article. On 399, Hoffman writes, I'm not saying we should abandon attempts to entice corporations into being ethical, both environmentally and in other ways, by pointing out and providing opportunities where good ethics is good business. There are many places where such attempts fit well, but we must be careful not to cast this as the proper guidelines for business ethical responsibility. Because when it is discovered that many ethical actions are not necessarily good for business, then the rationale based on self-interest will come up morally short. Okay, so in other words, he thinks that people, if they fall for the argument that good ethics is good business, always and everywhere, then they're going to feel cheated or disappointed when they find out that that is not in fact the case. Okay, I guess I'd say in response to that, I agree with Hoffman that there is a trade-off, but I don't think the trade-off is as stark as he seems to make it in parts of this article. I think that there have been a number of companies in recent years, especially with companies that cater to millennials, that actually make it a thing to preserve and protect environmental causes and are financially successful as a result of making that their thing. So, for instance, Chipotle locally sources its food. That has expanded their customer base because they cater to a particular kind of customer. Okay, or the Patagonia example that we just looked at here. Their business success comes precisely from their doing a certain environmental project as part of their business. So I'm a little bit less skeptical than Hoffman is about that possibility. Okay, I want now to talk a little bit about a second issue, big issue in the Hoffman article. It kind of shifts gears and moves to other things in the second half of the article. This is the issue of whether non-human species, living things, and ecosystems. So this is a broad net I'm casting here. This is the issue of whether they are intrinsically valuable. Okay, in our day, this is very much a fault line for controversy. By intrinsically valuable, I mean valuable on their own behalf, in their own way, for their own sake, apart from the impact upon humans. This is a big fault line for controversy, and it's something that we've seen on several occasions recently in the Biden administration's first 100 days of office. So, for instance, the canceling of the Keystone Pipeline, a very controversial thing to do, but something that was done largely because of the potential impact that such a pipeline would have on non-human species, living things, and ecosystems. Okay, the Keystone Pipeline was routed through rural areas. It was not being routed through urban areas, and the possibility of an accident that involved humans and would have damaged humans was incredibly minimal. And yet, the Biden administration found its importance to cancel the pipeline because there was widespread public pressure against the possibility of damage to a non-human ecosystem. Okay, it's not just the Keystone Pipeline. There have also been a couple of other issues that the Biden administration has dealt with in the first 100 days that precisely focus on this kind of a question. What do you guys think about this question? Are non-human species, living things, or ecosystems inherently valuable? Some would argue against that idea and say that morality is a distinctively human phenomenon, and to try to say that other things besides humans have morally valent worth is to go too far. Others would say that the natural world isn't in and of itself something that has inherent worth that ought to be respected. What do we think about that question?
I agree.
You agree with the intrinsically valuable assertion? Okay, good. Why so?
I mean, I think that everything has a consequence. You know, like if you just think that you need to do stuff that's not gonna eventually affect everything in life.
Okay.
I mean, even if it doesn't affect
Right.
humans like directly, it's still affects.
Okay, so that's actually not, if I could press you a little bit, Keisha, thank you. That's actually not an intrinsically valuable argument. What you're saying is there's always an indirect impact on humans. So there is always, even if the Keystone Pipeline does, explode and cause a natural disaster that just affects the animals, still, eventually there will be an impact on humans. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So suppose that we could completely bracket that and say no impact on humans.
But I do think that other lives other than humans.
Okay, so you do think that other lives than humans have value. And again, I totally agree with you, actually, that in the end, humans can't extricate themselves from the ecosystem. So I think that there is that to consider as well. Yeah, Morris.
I don't think that. I mean, in a sense that animals do matter, but it's just kind of like humans take priority over animals.
Okay.
It's like God gave dominion over, or the people have dominion over animals, and so like, we have dominion to take care of them and respectfully do stuff.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
play the what if scenarios in this situation. Like, there's not been proven to have an accident on these pipelines.
Sure.
Like pipelines in the Gulf, sure, if you're fracking in the ocean, sure, there's a big chance of something to go wrong. But like over land and like a pipeline that can be easily fixed and not go into like a huge disaster.
Sure. So if human interests conflict with the interests of an ecosystem, a non-human ecosystem, and the trade-off might be elevating humans out of poverty versus potentially doing damage to a large number of animals. Take the people out of poverty, even if that could mean potential damage. Okay. Yeah, Brinkley.
Yeah, I agree with. Sorry, what's your name?
Morris.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with him because I like wildlife. Like I like protecting the environment and all that. But like he said, like humans come first,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone wants to talk about how the environment's going to be safe, but no one wants to talk about how all the people lost their jobs.
Right.
Sure. The Keystone Pipeline.
Sure. And the damage that's done to human communities and human
Yeah.
prosperity as a result of
Like
the
a lot
lost
of people,
jobs.
a lot of people who own the land that it would go through, we're gonna make money from that. You won't see that now.
Sure. Sure.
So I mean,
Okay.
people are putting like animal lives up to human lives, and I don't think that's right.
Okay. All right. Good. One last voice on this. Does anybody else have a last comment to make on this topic? Hoffman devotes the second half of this article to the question of whether there is intrinsic value in non-human things. We don't have enough time to actually look at some quotes from the article, but I'll commend that to your attention. You can look at it on your own time. Okay? Good. Thank you all for your attention today.